Following up on a rather lengthy lesson on the brain and the spinal cord, today we're going to just look at the spinal cord and the brain, and we're going to be looking at some of the ways that we can protect the spinal cord and the brain. So let's start with the bone. Okay, the bone is the hardest layer, and it's the outermost layer as well, that is going to help protect both the cranium, so our brain, and the vertebral column. Okay, so what protects the spinal cord. So these structures together provide a really strong, a rigid structure, and it's going to protect everything that lies underneath, because obviously our brain is quite soft and mushy, and same thing can be said about the spinal cord. So what I might do here is I'll get rid of my highlighting on the vertebral column and I'll switch that to a different colour. The vertebral column is made up of all of these individual vertebrae, okay? And the cranium is made up of all of these bones that were once independent but have been sutured together by these fibrous joints. And you'll note here that I'm not including the mandible in this protection of the cranium here. Okay. So the second layer, okay, second of three, almost there, very quick lesson today, is the meninges. Okay, and these meninges cover the surface of the brain, and they're made up of three different layers of connective tissue. The first layer, the outside layer, and I'll try and represent this in the same colours as what you've got in the diagram provided, is the dura mater. And the dura mater is the outer layer, and it's very thick and it's very fibrous. The next layer is the arachnoid mater, and the arachnoid mater got its name due to its spider-like appearance. So it kind of looks like these spider webs that I'm highlighting in green on the diagram now. Okay. The third and innermost layer is what we know as the pia mater. And the pia mater is a really fine layer, and it directly attaches to the brain and the spinal cord. And it contains all of those really delicate blood vessels necessary to provide both nutrients to the brain and the spinal cord, but also the removal of waste. Here is another representation, and we can see these three layers. So again, on the outside, I'll double check my colours. On the outside we have, in blue, this dura mater, okay? And so this dura mater is this outside layer here. Our next layer was our arachnoid mater, and we can see the arachnoid mater here. And it's in this arachnoid mater layer that we also have the cerebrospinal fluid, so something that we mentioned in our previous lesson, and it's something that I'll follow up on in a second. Our third and final layer is that pia mater, so that really fine layer on the inside that connects directly to the brain and the spinal cord. Now, I mentioned cerebrospinal fluid a second ago. Let's talk about what it does. So we already know that it occupies that subarachnoid space, so the space in between the arachnoid mater and the pia mater, and it circulates through that central canal, so what we mentioned in our prior lesson. Now, the cerebrospinal fluid itself doesn't come from nowhere. It comes from all of those surrounding capillaries. And it is largely a watery fluid, and it includes some other things. So some glucose, some protein matter, salts, and also urea, which is going to be a waste product that it is trying to remove from the brain and the spinal cord. Now, it has a few different functions. Number one, it acts as a shock absorber. Okay, so it acts as a big cushion for the brain and the spinal cord. So in the event of an impact or a collision or a bump or anything like that, this watery fluid suspends the brain and prevents a lot of the damage. So acting again as a bit of a cushion. Number two, it helps to support the cranium, because the cranium can now largely float in this fluid within the cranium. Okay, so the brain can float. And then lastly, transport. So we're looking again at providing nutrients to the brain and spinal cord, and also removing waste.